Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the cartoonist behind the IDW series Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees. It's Patrick Horvath. Thanks for coming on, Patrick.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me on.
How's the day starting for you on the sunny East Coast? You're not on the West Coast today because you're prepping for C2E2. How's it going?
It's going great. So far, so good. Yeah, I was saying I had a time for like a lovely little bike ride amongst all the kind of hurried madness of getting ready. So that's been pleasant. I didn't expect that. So it was a fun surprise.
I don't know why I really like exercising before conversations like this, where like doing an interview or something like that. I always feel like I'm in a good mind space when I do that. Maybe it's just like exercise is good for endorphins, period, and it's good for anything. Maybe I should just exercise before more things, Patrick.
Yeah. I feel like, to be totally frank, I did not get a lot of exercise over the last year. So any chance now that I get to have exercise, I'm like, you're just fully embracing it.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, especially before you go to C2E2, which you are this weekend, where you're tabling, right?
Yes, this is the second time I've ever tabled at a con, the first one being WonderCon.
Well, you're going to be at that table a lot, I imagine, so get your bike rides in.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about that? It's second time tabling. I mean, it's coming from the world, coming from the world of film, coming from other creative realms. I don't know how often you are going to table at like CinemaCon or something like that. But I mean, does that feel like a wildly different experience for you?
It's not wildly different. What's interesting to me is that this is essentially like doing the film festival circuit.
Sure.
If I had to come up with a correlation. So like the festival circuit is a lot of going around, talking to people you haven't met before, telling them what your project is for the first time. And I find that it's sort of similar, except you're just more stationary with cons. And I'm, same thing though. I'm telling strangers about my comic that probably some of them haven't heard about yet. And then the only thing that's different is that like a lot of people you do run into have read it, so that they're like they have things to tell you about it, which is a totally new experience because you don't really get that at all with the film festival stuff usually.
Yeah.
It's a little different. It's a little the same. I'm mostly excited about the, just meeting people that have, the audience, essentially. This is the first time I've really been able to interact at all. So, yeah, these cons are incredible. I mean, it's also like a very exhausting day, which I'm learning pretty quickly, like definitely a lot more than film festival stuff. So, yeah, it's funny because I'm kind of up. It's a little bit of adrenaline, I think, because you're half selling yourself and half, just sort of like, drawing or signing or whatever. And so by the end of it, I don't feel it until we're basically closing up, and then I just crash real hard.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the thing I never really understand is like how people also go out afterwards and like stay out late and then get up the next morning and do that. I'm like,
No.
I have quickly realized that I'm more like a shine brightly during the day and then maybe get some dinner and a drink and then go back to my hotel room and like watch Hackers or something like that.
I mean, that's the move.
Yeah.
If you want to, well, listen, if I was the man I was 20 years ago,
Yeah.
I would have done a lot different. But I mean, now I'm in my 40s. And I'm just I'm definitely coming to this sort of late, maybe more untraditionally than a lot of comic creators. So I'm more of what you just said. I'm basically going to go home, going to have some tea. I'm going to get something good to eat and try and get to bed.
It's a marathon, not a sprint. 3 days.
Exactly.
Have you done a 4-day convention yet? 4 days or?
Not yet.
It's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine.
If you go to New York is like 4 days of just insanity. Just because getting to the Javits Center, like nothing is close to the Javits Center. So you have to like walk a million miles to get there. And then, yeah. But so you said you were doing some art on some blank covers. What is prep for an event like this for you?
So, I mean, a lot of this is I've been partnering with a retailer from Final Order Comics, and we kind of partnered up to take on as many cons as I could. I kind of felt like I didn't know my way around that well, right? And then I also would love to just go to as many as I can, specifically this year, while I can, sort of have this book to tour around with. A lot of that prep is just kind of we work together, get out whatever. We've got a bunch of variants for the book that are just sort of fun, and we kind of went nuts with it. So we're traveling with those, and then we just got in a bunch of blank covers. So I thought it'd be fun to like literally paint like on because I do work traditionally. A lot of the stuff I do is ink and watercolor or ink and gouache. And then for these covers, I'm doing like acrylic gouache and regular gouache just for something special, basically, just to have a fun one of a kind of cover, and then to offer those just at the cons exclusively.
You're making me really wish I was going to C2E2 because those sound awesome. You don't get watercolor gouache on like sketch covers very often. They're normally quite literally sketch covers, so that makes it quite the treasure.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the fun thing about acrylics, especially, is you can kind of go on anything with that paint, and it's just kind of fun. So I figured, why not?
Yeah, it's a really interesting experience. I mean, your first con was, I read an interview with you, I think at your first con, it was LA Comic Con. Was that the first one?
Yeah, that was. I didn't table at it. I showed up and signed at IDW's booth.
Had you been to a convention before? Because it is kind of like walking into a completely different world.
No, nothing like that. No, totally first time ever really walking into any sort of traditional con like that. I've done a bunch of like little pop-up stuff the decade before. Not a ton, but I mean a handful. And it would be mostly like zine stuff. It'd be selling zines, like little comic zines or whatever. So just local stuff in LA. So having sort of my first con experience being at LA Comic Con was very convenient. Obviously, this was local, and it's a relatively smaller
Yeah.
of all the cons, and so that was just a good way to get my feet wet, so to speak. It was good. I liked it. Yeah, WonderCon was more of a full-on experience of just having a bunch more people there and a lot of signing and remarks and stuff, and just getting to meet a bunch more people. And at that point too, I think issue 4 just came out. Which is kind of a meaty one to sink your teeth into. And so that kind of had the benefit of that.
That's awesome. Well, I did want to get into some of your background before we get into Beneath the Trees. And you actually mentioned something I wanted to bring up. You apparently were making zine comics back in high school. Was that the case?
It wasn't even zine comics. They were like, it was just what I did in high school was like, it was a couple dozen pages and it was just a comic on like printer paper. And I just did the whole thing. And I didn't even put it out or anything. I literally just had the one thing I drew. And I just had it. It's like in the mid 90s, like 95, 96. And then I ended up also doing some strips for the school newspaper.
Nice.
There was like Captain Bratwurst, and he had this Condiment Crusaders, which were ketchup and mustard. And he would, so basically it's a ketchup and mustard squeeze bottles. And he would turn them upside down and kind of give them a bear hug on each side. And then that's what he would shoot to fly through the air and solve crime. And that lasted for like a year or whatever. That was the main one I think I did. Anyway, so a little bit is, yeah, I mean, I was definitely into it. I never had done it at that point or thinking that I would ever professionally do comics or anything. It was just the fun thing to do. And then I basically stopped drawing for like a decade when I finished high school.
Mm-hmm.
And then during college, I pretty much switched my focus to working and like majoring in film. And I went to University of Iowa and did the film program there. And then it felt like I just couldn't really distract myself with anything except for movies at the time if I thought I'd ever have a shot of actually making them. And unfortunately, I mean, I really wish that I had taken art classes in college because the resources would have been great to take advantage of. And I think it would have benefited me. But I mean, I also wouldn't be who I am today, I guess, if I had. So, yeah.
It doesn't seem like it held you back too much.
Yeah. I was able to jump back on the bandwagon.
That was something I came across where you apparently, you were making movies when around 2010 you started drawing again and have been doing it consistently ever since. I imagine one of the things that was really nice about getting into drawing is like not to like diminish the movie making experience, but that is always going to be something in service of a whole, working with a bunch of different people. And that's not to say you don't have control, especially when you're the director, but drawing for yourself is something that is purely for yourself. But on top of that, you get a lot more freedom and control than you might get in a movie. And I imagine that kind of overall concoction when you're in the midst of making movies and stuff like that probably felt pretty nice. Getting back to that and doing something for yourself.
The thing I kind of keep coming back to when I talk to friends about it that do work in film and stuff, it's just like, it's so, anytime you see like, so after I started making movies, I was just immediately like, oh, any movie is pretty much a good, if you get a movie finished, that's a good movie. Like if you can finish them,
Absolutely.
if you can create a movie and it gets out in front of people, like hallelujah, that's a minor miracle. Way to go. There's so much stuff involved, right? And then to get a movie that is legitimately like, oh my God, that was like an incredible work of art. That was like a very solid, complete idea and very close, I think, to what the artistic aspirations were. Way to go. And it's just so hard to get to that. That's even more, that's like a major miracle. So then, and also just to sort of digress real quick, like, you got to practice the medium you're working in.
Yeah.
If the only way you can practice the medium is by getting together like close to $1 million every time to like get people all in the same spot at the same time to shoot the thing you're trying to do. Like that's just so much just to practice the art, right? Versus, yeah, just like you said, versus just drawing, there's not a lot of people involved. And you get your odds of getting a complete expression of what you're trying to do are so much greater. And it kind of was born, me revisiting it like around 2010 was born out of frustration of how much, even on these small movies, which are arguably like way easier to do than a big movie, there still was like too many people involved. And I mean, there just need to be, but there's so much time. And I just wanted to be creative again and not have to worry about all these other people doing stuff. So yeah, I just started drawing, and I mean, it really wasn't long before I was like, I should really think about making a comic. And at that point, had a lot of friends showing me more really interesting comics that I hadn't heard of before. So I was just like, yeah, I think this would be a great venue for storytelling. I really need to do this.
And that was when you started developing the Captain Bratwurst franchise?
No, that was like high school. I totally
No, I was kidding. I was saying, I was joking. You're redeveloping it because it was going to be your big IP, Patrick.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Captain Bratwurst ready.
Yeah, exactly.
Ready to go.
I do think one of the things that's interesting about that, though, is like you're talking about how you need $1 million to practice your craft for movies. But both of them do have one similar thing involved, which is that they're both incredibly time consuming. And it's like,
definitely,
there's a natural conflict between your kind of two sides where it's like there's film Patrick and then there's comic Patrick. And by nature, you cannot really do both in a constant sense, because if you're trying to do like Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees and it's 6 issues and you're writing it and you're drawing it and you're doing colors with a gouache and everything like that, that is pretty time consuming. Well, actually, I don't know. Maybe you're incredibly fast.
No, it is time consuming. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like there's the natural time conflict of like, if you're doing comics, you have to be doing comics. And if you're doing movies, you have to be doing movies. And that, I imagine, is a challenge to some degree.
Yeah, the fun needle to thread would be basically like, because development takes so long on film, would be to, try and get something through development while you're actually just working on the comic of something totally unrelated. And then like if something ever catches fire with the film, then there's that, later. And then at that point, you got to put together a schedule and everything. So that was kind of like the pipe dream. I don't know. I still would like to do film, but to be totally frank, like I'm having a ton of fun doing comics, and I am going to be doing it more in the immediate future. So like
wink, wink.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what it's going to be yet, but it's we just got to figure it out. But I'm having a ton of fun doing it and working with these people that I'm working with, and it's been a blast so far.
I did want to ask about your reading background a bit, because I had read that you read comics when you were a kid, and your high school comics reading oriented on the Image comics of the 1990s.
Yep, most definitely.
But then you stopped reading until after college, when you got into like Charles Burns and Daniel Clowes and even some Vertigo books. Did you find that latter era of reading proved to be a lot more influential to your storytelling and comic making brain than your earlier reading, or do you think you can see some of that Image and like superhero stuff in the way you look at comic stories?
I think the latter stuff completely informed it, and the earlier stuff was just kind of what whet my appetite. I don't know that I honestly see a lot of that stuff as inspirational or influential, but but it was always like, it was kind of it was what got me, my foot in the door, so to speak, in terms of just getting me into the world of comics. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like, but then also it's also funny to just kind of get all the interviews with Todd McFarlane talking about whatever. And it's still like, he's very much like this kind of uncle figure now that I've seen. And I mean, and Spawn was a big one for me, like when I got into the Image comics and stuff, right? So it's just so funny to still kind of be decades later reading these interviews and taking sage advice from him. So like it's very full circle in that sense. Like it's just kind of fun.
Well, I mean, you may not want to make your own Spawn, but I have to say there's something to be said about people like Todd McFarlane and his energy that he has for this stuff.
That's exactly it. And I would put this on his art too, because he's very much the type of person who throws himself into it.
Yeah.
I feel the same about Daniel Warren Johnson, to be honest, too. Like, in terms of art, especially when I got back into art, I was always kind of like, I don't know, this, like, I got to make a perspective here. And it's like, I'm still, kind of getting my sea legs with this, and I don't really know what I'm doing. And okay, and maybe this and that, and just kind of really, like, worrying too much about it. And then I watched them draw, and they're just literally like, I don't know, there's this thing here and this thing, and then look at that. It kind of looks like a perspective already, and I'm just going to throw some chains in here, and you're like, this is great.
Yeah.
Like that type of stuff is so good for me to see. You know what I mean? But I feel like, with Todd McFarlane's business sense, it's very much the same. Like, he's like, you just got to do it. Like, you just got to get in there. You got to get going.
I mean, like, you can boil it down to, I don't know if you know anything about his background with his toys, or excuse me, figures. I don't want to get yelled at.
Yo, sure, yeah.
His, like, the McFarlane, I guess it is called McFarlane Toys. He's probably not going to yell at me for that. But if I remember correctly, he got the baseball, like the home run ball for like Mark McGwire, like when he hit like the 70th home run and set the record and everything like that. And, or maybe it was the 62nd, whatever. He got a baseball that was very important. And then he used that to like leverage a deal with Major League Baseball so he could make figures of baseball players with McFarlane Toys.
So smart.
And like, what a badass. He's like leveraging Major League Baseball as this dude from Canada whose like most famous contribution to baseball was once taking a picture where he was shirtless swinging a baseball bat for a comics promotional card. That's about it. And so good job, Todd McFarlane. But yeah, I mean, I really do think it's the energy. Like, that's some of the things I think is lost about the, not to make this too much about the 90s image stuff, but it's like the energy that they would bring to their books, regardless of quality, was really impressive. But I will say, I think in a lot of ways, your work, you can see a lot more of it in kind of the cartoonists that you kind of, were really interested in after college, but also like the Vertigo stuff. I think that Beneath the Trees may have had, like, they're not really big. I'm trying to think of if there's really a whole lot of anthropomorphic stuff in Vertigo. I guess Fables has a lot of anthropomorphic stuff.
Sure.
I could see it being like a latter day Vertigo book in a lot of ways.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, that's definitely a huge compliment. I mean, it also is very cool that I've got Maggie Howell as the editor on this too, who came from DC. So, I mean, it's read Mark Doyle as well. I mean, it's just been, I don't know, all that stuff is very much a stroke of luck for me. As soon as I saw they were on board with IDW, before I even signed a contract or anything, was a huge plus for me. So, I mean, I really appreciate hearing that. So
you started kind of on your journey to making comics when I think your first project, from what I understand, was Josh Trujillo's Love Machine anthology back in 2014. And you also did Haha #4 with W. Maxwell Prince in 2021. I love saying that, by the way. Every time I just say haha out loud, it just makes me happy.
I love it too, yeah.
Yeah, but you had this entire career, but you actively pursued comics. I think one of the things that's interesting to me is like a lot of people who make comics spend like kind of their lifetime as being like, this is what I'm going to do. And like, that's like they kind of train to the moment where they get out there. And you were like, I'm going to do something else and then adjust completely. Did you find that like those projects you were taking on and other ones you might have been working on and projects you might have been developing that we didn't know about, that were those kind of like your comic schools in your path to getting to Beneath the Trees?
Definitely. I mean, it was, especially with Love Machines, it was just working with a writer and getting a script and just having that as something to use as an example for script writing. And then also just working on comics language and for layouts on spreads and getting the idea of flow and all of that. And it felt like, I mean, it was Love Machines. I did some smaller zine stuff after that. And then
you did Free For All too, right?
Free For All, and like 20 around like, let's say like 2018, 19 and 20, which was really just in between whatever jobs I had going. I would squeeze in a couple of pages here and there. And then that was at the end of like Free For All. I felt like, okay, yeah, let's do a book. And I'd pitched some stuff around that time too, with another writer, Ben Cook. And it was just kind of, I was just kind of waiting, I guess, for something to come up, but I was still working in movies too. So I wasn't like actively pitching or anything at the time.
Right.
And then I ended up getting I'd done a cover for Ice Cream Man for W. Maxwell Prince. And so and it was a really excellent little relationship that we had just doing that. And then he came at me with hey, if you'd be interested in doing interiors, I have a whole comic I would love to pitch for you just to be the artist for. It's part of this Sad Clown anthology. It'd be totally writing to your strengths. If you'd be interested, let me know. And I was like, yeah, yes.
I love sad clowns.
Like, yeah. I love sad clowns. I like drawing, but I like to draw. So this sounds wonderful. So then I ended up reading the script and I loved it. And it was, that one was a joy to work on. And I think at that point, as soon as I did Haha, I was like, okay, yeah, I do love drawing traditional. This is going to work out great. I'm into it. So that was kind of where it all came together, I think. And I was ready to go.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. Looking for the right place to read digital comics? You can find it at Omnibus. Omnibus is a modern digital comic book store and reader app carrying your favorite single issues, volumes, and omnibuses all day and date. It's just like a comic shop where you pay per book, but digital. Omnibus has even upped its game lately, adding an iPhone version of the app with Android coming very soon. That gives you more about what you love about Omnibus, but in your pocket. Looking for an ideal digital comic store, but with an excellent shopping and reading experience, one that uses novel discovery features to help fans find their next new favorite book, and one that features many of the best comics and publishers today, including publishers like Image, Boom, Dark Horse, and more. You can find that all on Omnibus. Visit the web store or download the app today at omnibus.app. And now, back to the show. I mean, it's tough to answer this question because you don't really have a frame of reference for what quote-unquote normal is. But do you feel like coming from a different... Like, you came into comics later. You came into comics without having the baggage of, like, coming up, making a... I mean, you weren't reading them so religiously in a lot of ways that some other people might have been. Do you feel like that kind of more unconventional approach shifted how you view and make comics in some ways?
Definitely. I feel like because of that sort of untraditional way into comics, I just don't know. I guess I don't know what I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, there's a lot of the, like, you know, more traditional stuff that people will even talk about in conversation. I'll just be like, and just politely nod because I don't know what I'm talking about. So it's all that stuff. When I get into the actual like guts of making the comic, I think that I stumble into things where people go, oh, this is just like this thing that I didn't know about. You know what I mean? And I kind of like sort of accidentally stumbled onto a very common way to do something or whatever. Like, or, you know, on the other side of that coin, like I'm sort of just I'm just kind of doing whatever kind of feels necessary, but maybe isn't normal at all. And it just kind of sticks out that way. I'm definitely just kind of taking a step back and, you know, in terms of stuff that I do, I kind of can do a little bit of everything in terms of like, you know, I can do video work. I can write scripts or prose. I can do 3D modeling and motion graphics work and all sorts of weird different stuff. All those different disciplines it's sort of the jack of all trades, master of none thing. But at the same time, I kind of feel like having those different skill sets kind of inform the different things that you do in untraditional ways, and I like that. And so I feel like it's a strength, if anything, that I'm kind of coming at this from a non-traditional way.
I think the way it comes out the most, and this is just me as an outsider, so I apologize if I'm horribly categorizing your comics, but there's a page in the first issue where it's Samantha in Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, #1. It's Samantha, our cute, fuzzy serial killer, who is sitting in a bath reading, and she's got a mug. There's like this 6-pound grid after it shows her, and a 6-pound grid. It's got a mug. It's got like the varying chemicals from like whatever her bath bomb or whatever that she put in there.
Yeah.
And then it's got, I don't actually know what the third thing is there, but anyways, and then she's reading, and then I want to say, does a pro move. She uses her foot to turn the water back on so she can get more hot water in there. I do that too. Good job, Samantha. I don't know if it's a good thing that I'm associating myself with a serial killer right now, but whatever. Goodbye, her. Anyways, that for most people, most creators, that page wouldn't exist. You would just go straight from the foxes licking the blood to dinner, because you don't need that. I put air quotes, so no, you don't need that. And so a lot of times things aren't prioritized in that way. You're prioritized based off need, because one of the big conflicts in comics is like page count. Like, what do I have the ability to fit in there?
Oh my God, yes.
But I think that is the type of thing that makes you really good at what you do, though, is because you prioritize things that make the story feel more whole and real in a real way. And I think that that's really great. So good job by you, Patrick.
Oh, dude, that's a huge compliment. Thank you very much. I had a big, it's a wrestling match trying to get, so it's a horror comic, right? I mean, even though it is cute and fuzzy, like it needs to have these moments. One of the hardest things in horror, this is the exact same thing with filmmaking, by the way, everything we're talking about right now.
Right.
There's these moments that you need to build in for atmosphere. And you need to have also, just to use the common parlance, the vibe. And so like you need to really fight for those moments. And on set, you're fighting your AD who's telling you they don't have time for this extra shot. And in comics, you're fighting page count. And I think that one of the hardest things with Beneath the Trees was just finding that space for, the dismembering of the duck, or getting the moment after her, murder and burying, where she's just sort of having this, it's her moment. It's very much her moment of the release that she gets and that relaxation. And it really felt necessary. I needed to put that in. Like, it felt very necessary for me to have that in there to kind of tell her whole story. I'm very conscious of that stuff, of really doing the best I can to sort of play the balancing act with your budget of pages that you have to work with. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the number one thing I look at when I'm just breaking the script down. And the smaller stuff is it's just kind of where you're talking directly to the reader, I feel like, in terms of a connection versus just like straight info. I'm not really into, like, the info approach is always necessary in terms of, the nuts and bolts, but there's something that's sort of, you can't put your finger on it element to stuff, I think, that you can get in with those special pages.
Yeah, I mean, that page is atmosphere. It says a lot about the character. It also kind of makes her creepier in some ways, because she just murdered somebody and she's like, time to curl up with a nice book and
you need that. Exactly.
Bath. Yeah, it's like, that stuff is really fascinating, and it says a lot. And it is interesting because, like, there is that info approach where, and this is with everything. It's like, I remember watching a show once, and it was like, had just went on streaming, and almost immediately people were saying what happened at the end of it, because all they did was just fast forward to the end so they could reveal that on social media so they could get all their engagement and stuff. And it is interesting how, like, I don't know, I think that's part of the reason why Beneath the Trees feels so nice, is like, it kind of is, I don't want to say counter programming, because I don't want to give you, I mean, like, other people do this, but it is something I think feels atypical in this moment, and I like that. But let me break down what it is really quick. So we're going to be talking about Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, your horror series at IDW with letter Hassan Otsmane-Elhaou. I'm going to read the very long solicit. Give me a second. Don't murder the locals. This is small town serial killer, upstanding citizen, and adorable brown bear Samantha Strong's cardinal rule. After all, there's a sea of perfectly ripe potential victims in the big city just beyond the forest. And when you've worked as hard as Sam to build a cozy life and a thriving business in a community surrounded by friendly fellow animal folk, warm decor, and the aroma of cedar trees and freshly baked apple pie, the last thing you want is to disturb the peace. So you can imagine her indignation when one of Woodbrook's own meets a grisly, mysterious demise, and you wouldn't blame her for doing anything it takes to hunt down her rival before the town self-destructs and Sheriff Patterson starts literally barking up the wrong tree. I do want to start with the origins of this story. This basically all just started with the image in your brain of a cute, murderous, anthropomorphic bear, right?
Yeah, I mean, I literally just drew it. Back when I started drawing again, I kind of, it also sort of coincided with me quitting smoking, and I was just needing something to do in the morning. So it turned into coffee and drawing every morning.
Wait, really quick, I just want to say, I just had artist Jacob Phillips on the podcast, and he talked about how he did a certain work specifically one way because he just didn't have pens that morning. And I love all the random things that fuel these creative decisions. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, continue.
So it became like a daily practice. And also just to, like, not to put too much emphasis on like the amount of time you need to spend to get good at something, but it's like, well, in the back of my head, I was like, well, let's get my 10,000 hours. You know what I mean? Like, let's just draw. We just got to draw a bunch, partially because I wanted to and partially because I just wanted to improve. And so I would do this daily drawing every day, and I didn't have a plan of what it would be. And then as I start making lines, they kind of start becoming a picture of some sort. They tend to look like a snapshot of some moment. They almost kind of want you to come up with a context for what this is. Who's this character? Like, what are they doing here? What's going on in this drawing? And one of them was this bear with like overalls and this bloody axe on their shoulder. And they were sort of anthropomorphic. And I was like, well, it'd be funny if they lived in like a Richard Scarry sort of town, like busy town, and like they were the serial killer that nobody knew was hiding in plain sight, and they were like an upstanding member of the community as far as anybody knew. And I was like, that'd be funny. And that was kind of always in my head. And then I was like, oh, it'd be funny if there was like another killer. And then it was like, you need a killer to catch a killer. And then at that moment, I kind of just had that nugget of a story in my head for a while. And I was like, if I ever get a chance to pitch stuff, I'll pitch that. Mm-hmm. And so that's exactly what happened with IDW. And then at that moment, they were like, I gave them like 4 pitches. And they were like, we want this one. Like, tell us everything about the murder bear. And I was like, oh, okay. And so then at that point, I fleshed it all out into the 6 issues that we have. Yeah, it was just a random thing that I was like, that'd be kind of funny.
I have to say the murder bear would have been a pretty good title. It's very much more abbreviated, but at the same time, the murder bear flows very nicely off the tongue.
Yeah, it does. Murder Bear is great. It's also a funny way to just describe it. Aside from, I like it just like the colloquial, like, oh yeah, Murder Bear. Yes, very good.
Yes.
I mean, the title, I mentioned elsewhere, it's just, yeah, it comes from that song from like the 20s, and they finally put lyrics to it in like the 30s or whatever. That was a Teddy Bear's Picnic. And there's a really popular, not popular, but like famous version from like the 30s that Henry Hill sings. But I heard like a 90s Kids Bop version or something like that from like a compilation that would always be on TV that I was watching all the time.
That sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, yeah. And it was, but the Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees just seems so sinister to me. And I was like, well, that's because I mean, my brain just kind of be like, I know this is for kids and it's supposed to be cute, but like, what do they do that nobody can see? Like, what's going on? And so as soon as I saw the drawing, I was like, oh, yeah, it'd be called Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees because this is the Teddy Bear's Picnic. Like, this is great. And it just kind of was always the thing I wanted to do with it.
I really love in pretty much every interview I read, and not saying people are wrong for doing this, but everyone was like, so this is Dexter, right? And you're just basically like, it's more like Richard Scarry meets Murder Bear meets a children's song called The Teddy Bear's Picnic. And it's like, that's like, we're always trying to like assign reason and influence to things. And sometimes it's like Busy, Busy Town and a creepy song that you heard a Kids Bop version of. And that's how it happened.
I mean, yeah, the Dexter thing has been so easy to use as a cultural touchstone, and people kind of get it, but it also is like, it's only misleading in the sense of like the, Samantha and who she chooses as victims. And it's like completely different in that regard, just because I very much did not want to, whoever she killed, I did not want to be justified in any way whatsoever. I definitely wanted it to be not cool.
This isn't like superhero Samantha.
No, man. It's very cold-blooded. It's definitely, I mean, but I mean, at the same time, like it's the more random, the better, right? Just makes all the sense in the world in terms of not wanting to get caught. So it just kind of needed, required that they be just innocent, random people. So, yeah.
I want to go back to what you were saying about when you did that original piece of art. Do you, no matter when you're drawing, always think in story?
Yes. Like as I'm doodling, not necessarily, but like I will immediately just start putting together like a story in my head from what this thing is. Most of the time I don't tell anybody, like especially for all these like daily drawings that I do, because I also love just hearing what other people think, but I'm like immediately need to sort of put a context into something that I see. It's just kind of the way my brain, I definitely have the type of brain that likes putting together, it's like, well, why is this thing that way? And then, same thing when you overhear somebody one side of the conversation and you start putting together the other side of the conversation that must be on the phone that's making them say this stuff. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, I wonder what they got going on and what's their life like and whatever, I feel like it's all part of the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, if you're drawing a murder bear, what's going on in their life that led them there?
Yeah, exactly.
Read Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees and you'll find out. I do have to ask about the murder bear herself, Samantha Strong. Mm-hmm. I find her to be a really fascinating character. Not a hero, but she is our protagonist. What went into developing the book's lead? I
felt like it would just be a fun challenge to have a serial killer be the main character. I've done similar stuff in the past with movies. I'm just constantly sort of fascinated with that. And it also kind of felt like the fun shift that happens in Psycho with Norman Bates. And, you're sort of introduced to him like a little later on, and all of a sudden you're just following him. And then you're also like kind of rooting for him to get away with what he's doing in a weird way. And I felt like that weird kind of murky space would be really fun to take the audience. And especially with this, just to like have them sit with her the whole time felt very fun and kind of interesting. So that was the main challenge that I wanted to do it, why I wanted to do it. But the actual writing for her and coming up with the character, I put together my own sort of profile that I have in my head that I kind of use for what kind of steers her. And I basically just play everything against that and kind of see how she bounces around the world that way and, put stress on her, et cetera, and see how she handles it. And it's, it's been a lot of fun, to be honest. But I find that sort of psychopath mind like just fascinating. And I don't know what that means about me, but it makes for a fun comic.
I mean, isn't it strange how, depending on how you position, I guess this works for any story, but depending on how you position like a serial killer story, it completely changes how you view it. It's like, I watch Zodiac and I'm like obsessed. I love Zodiac. And you watch Zodiac and you see like, the reporters going after the Zodiac killer and the cops going after the Zodiac killer, and they're the heroes. But like, if you watch a story or read a story like Beneath the Trees where like the main character is the serial killer, if it's done in a certain way, there's like a weird part of you that's like, I want them to be okay. And like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I don't know what that says to us about, or says about us as humans, that we're like, okay, we're gonna watch Dexter and we're gonna be like, this guy's a hero. I'm like, this guy is literally a serial killer. This is very problematic that we're saying he's a hero, and he's
Yeah.
been around for like 7 seasons doing this, and we're like, good, more seasons. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's also, especially in the case of Beneath the Trees, it's you have your sort of lawful evil and then your chaotic evil.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like that's another element that you can have in. If you were to take like Deadwood has always like been a big example in my mind. I can't think of Powers Booth's character in it, but where you have like Schweringer, who's sort of like set up as the main baddie at the beginning of Deadwood, and then you have Powers Booth show up, and it's just kind of this, he's the bad guy.
Yeah.
He's like Powers Booth is the evil. He's evil. Like it's not quite as the same dynamic with this, but it's like it was
Scales.
inspired by that. Yeah, exactly. Scales was a big important thing for me and to have this sort of like chaotic element brought in with Nigel and stuff. It's just like, oh yeah, this is gonna be what's driving it.
One thing I really liked is how you kind of bake in these like little character things about Samantha throughout the series. Like there's this one part in the first issue that I feel like is super important about the character that I really glommed onto, that I don't know if other people have brought up to you, but I love the conversation she has with Charlie in the shop where she's telling him where to put a delivery, and he knows before she even says anything that it should be neat and everything should be tidy. And like that is like such an emblematic and specific foundational insight into that character, both in her town life and her city and in her city life. Because like she does actually kill someone, it's like super neat and tidy as far as serial killings can go.
Yeah, everything nice and clean.
Yeah, and it's funny reading through the book and seeing these little things. Like another thing I really liked was in, I think it was issue 2, the sheriff stops to ask her outside of her shop where she was when the killing probably happened. And she said that she was out in the city doing her thing. And she's smiling and being all like, not jovial because there was a serial killer, but being like accommodating and being cordial with this person that she's probably known for a long time. And as soon as he walks past, she goes ice cold. Just ice cold instantaneously. And it really emphasizes that the mask she wears isn't just about killing, but her like daily engagements with people. And I really like that stuff.
With everyone.
Yeah.
And it's because she just doesn't have that. She literally doesn't have that emotional connection with anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just very important to have all of that. Like she's basically like, it's all just a facade. And it felt so funny to play that up as much as I could, because it just counterpoints all the warm, fuzzy stuff so well. Like all that stuff just plays against all the cute Woodbrook stuff so well.
I mean, so does frickin' Cherry Gherkins. Sorry, I just opened up the second issue. It's funny. You've probably gotten this before too, but it's funny how in a book filled with literally multiple serial killers, I'm like, Cherry Gherkins is the worst person in this book.
I feel so bad for Cherry.
Poor Cherry. I mean, not poor Cherry. She's a jerk, but at the same time, she probably didn't deserve that. But there is,
she did not. Yeah.
She's like dominating of her husband, but she clearly loves him, so that she has redeeming factors.
And he loves her.
And he loves her
all the way. But it's obvious that it's a problematic relationship, right?
Yeah, it absolutely is.
But I mean, like at the same time, if they both love each other, like what do you do with it? It just felt like it felt very much like, I wanted to have that sort of character in there. And it felt like a funny thing to put, because I felt like every town needs somebody like that, even if there is a town of like seemingly awesome, wholesome, cute animal people. Like you got to have a Cherry Jerkin or Gherkins. Sorry.
She's a Cherry Jerkin.
No, it's Gherkins, like the pickle.
No, I know.
Oh yeah. But I wanted, in my mind, I kept saying Jerkins. Anyway, because I feel like this. I feel like we just missed a real golden opportunity that everybody could have referred to her as Jerkins.
Oh yeah. I don't know. It is really fascinating. Like the moment where she like double parked people so she go getting coffee. Yeah. I'm like, she is going down. I don't even know. I haven't read the rest of this issue, but she is victim number 2. 100%. I know what's happening.
Yeah.
Poor Cherry.
Yeah, poor Cherry.
I did want to talk about the anthropomorphic citizens of the world. You knew you wanted to go this route because you had the vision of Sam, so that was locked in. But I do think that means that you have to draw a lot of animal people with emotional responses we'd pick up on. And one of my favorites was in issue number 1 when there's a street hustler who's playing 3-card Monty, and you showed 3 different people responding to it. One of them is a dog that's watching with his jaw dropped as he pants. And it was so perfect because it's just like exactly what a dog watching 3-Card Monty would look
exactly.
like.
He was very excited.
He was very excited. Yeah. What was the key to selling the expressions of these characters without losing their animal nature? Because if you go too human, you kind of lose it a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's sort of the, it's kind of the balancing act of just kind of the whole comic, to be honest. Of just kind of, you can't make it too cute, you can't make it too dark. Same with the animals, like you can't make them too human, but at the same time, I mean, honestly, like as long as I felt like as long as I kept it as, not maybe Disneyfy the animal people and make them like more, just based off of actual animals as I could. Any sort of like human stuff I would put onto them, facially speaking, worked out pretty well. It definitely, there's a couple maybe that gave me some trouble, but mostly it just kind of felt like it felt very natural as I got into a lot of it. I think that like it is important getting those, getting that emotion in there, getting that performance in there, and it was reading. So honestly, it wasn't too hard. But I was afraid that if I didn't land the stuff, then it would be a big problem. A big inspiration too was just like Juanjo Guarnido's stuff in Black Sad.
Oh yeah,
I mean he's coming at it from, as I understand it, Disney background. He had a Disney background, I guess, before he got full into it. Based out of France, I think, and so he, is a little more than mine. But I mean, like his work is incredible.
Yeah.
And so I definitely would look towards that too to kind of see. And I mean, his stuff is so cartoony that I kind of love it, and would look back and see like maybe. Sweeten some of the expression stuff that I had going on, even based on that.
Yeah, he does it differently, but I think you guys are kind of rooted in the same place where it's like it achieves that balance really nicely. I do like some of the little things you get to play with in regards to some of the animal characteristics coming out, like when Birdie like drops his head into his clothing in his shell because he's like so freaked out that that Samantha shows up. And
you have to do that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great moment. I also love that he still eats his like lollipop while his head is in his shell, which was really great. I have to ask about the most important part of this comic, and something I've not seen anyone else talk about, which is very disturbing to me. This comic is about anthropomorphic animals. Everyone is an animal of some variety, and yet they have regular animal pets. To say nothing of the wildlife. Is this like a goofy Pluto type situation where a dog owns a dog? Like, what is going on here?
Yes. It's pretty much, I mean, it's, you know what, I mean, the main inspiration for that stuff was in the Richard Scarry Busy Town, one of the covers. And on one of them has like a little row of shops, and one of them was a butcher shop, and it was owned by a pig, and they had like sausage links in the window. And I just remember being like, what? How does this work, Richard Scarry? Like, what does that mean? Like, who's being ground up and served here? And so I mean, that's exactly. And then you would also see like different Busy Town characters walking dogs and stuff. And I was like, okay, yes. Okay. So we have regular animals and we have the anthropomorphic animals, and I don't know why, but, I just wanted that. I wanted that. But then what was funny about it is that like, as soon as I started kind of wrapping my brain around including them, it became, I mean, some it's just like the day-to-day, whatever. But then other stuff, it was kind of like, well, when you have like an issue 3 with Melody in the butcher shop, and you just have all these other animals sort of like, oh, it's so scary. Like things seem so strange right now. And can you give me all that meat, please? And like not, batting an eye when they order the veal and whatever. And then also to have Samantha have something that kind of like taps into the bears that Samantha encounters kind of know her. They're about the only ones that know her true nature, right?
I was going to bring that up, yeah.
Yeah. Like, I feel like that was basically what I ended up doing with it, and like really sneaking my teeth into, just to have this sort of, getting at the weird, kind of primal things that are going on underneath Samantha. Because I feel like she doesn't really examine herself at all. She just kind of does what she needs to. You know what I mean? I
love that moment. God, was it issue 4 or maybe it was issue 5 where she comes across the bears and the bears fight? And I have to say, I don't know what this says about me, but the bear fight was actually the only part that I genuinely found hard to handle, because like when the one bites the other one's snout, and I was just like, oh my God, this is so intense. I'm having a hard time with this. But it was like, I don't remember what she says. She says something like, yes, like she's just watching it. And
Yeah.
it really emphasized, and I think this is why it's smart that you included the other animals, the wildlife. It really emphasized how thin the line is between these anthropomorphic characters and the regular animals. Like when like the facade is down, Sam is no different than those other bears.
But I mean, the bears in nature kind of require murder to keep living. You know what I mean? Like
It's not murder at that point. It's the circle of life.
Yeah, exactly. So like, it's a weird perversion of that with Samantha in my mind, how I feel like she is doing a very unnatural thing, in terms of how she sort of, goes about doing what she feels she needs to do. And yet at the same time, like, it sort of is how she completes herself in a weird way.
Some people take baths. Some people are serial killers. Some people do both. Apparently that's Sam. And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. Zoop is about to unleash one of their biggest months ever, and it all starts with a follow-up to the mega hit Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees from creator Patrick Horvath, Free for All. Zoop is also launching its very first game campaign this month. They're licensing Tim Seeley's Hack Slash and creating a deck-building card game for its 20th anniversary. There are even more upcoming campaigns from the likes of Jim Starlin, Christian Ward, Eric Palicki, Adriana Mello, Paula Lore, and others. Also, if you ever want to own a piece of Zoop, now you can. They're running an equity crowdfunding campaign where your contribution will earn you shares in the company, as well as other perks. Visit republic.com/Zoop to support and become an investor in Zoop. For creators looking to crowdfund your project or have your books for sale in Zoop's brand new e-commerce marketplace, email them today at hello@wearezoop.com. And now, back to the show. I did want to ask about your process because there's like a lot of puzzle pieces in this that like have to fit together. There's a lot of different things that, obviously, like you going into issue 1, you have to know where you're going with issue 5 because issue 5 has a lot of dominoes that fall that kind of really start with the first issue. Mm-hmm. Did you plot out the whole series before you got into it?
Yeah, definitely. I am a writer that needs to know what the whole roadmap looks like before I get into it.
Did you script the whole thing first too?
Mostly, yeah. So I did a huge, really detailed outline of all the issues. Initially, it was going to be 5 issues. Initially, it was going to be a 5-chapter graphic novel. And then I gave that to IDW, and then they were like, oh, these issue breaks are great. And I was like, oh, yeah, it could be an issue.
Sure. That's totally what I meant.
And they were like, we actually would love to. I was like, I thought this was going to be a graphic novel. They're like, no, let's do issues because, this works really well for it. And then also we would like to pitch doing 6 issues, not 5, because they thought that, it would be good to let it breathe. I'm glad they said yes to that. It was an awesome idea. And I'd like to thank Maggie Howell for that. And the issue that kind of came out of that was issue 3 with Melody. And it really gave that whole thing space to do what it does. And so I had all those, again, just the beats on a big old outline. And then I drew issue 1. So I did, the script, the art, and then I was getting ready to start on issue 2 script. And then at that point, I just like hunkered down and did like the rest of the scripts. Mm-hmm. And then I went back and did all the art. And so actually, except for the issue 6. And then so basically like I did 2 through 5. And then I did all the art for 2 through 5. And then I did the script for 6 and the art for 6. Weirdly, just the way it worked out. But I did know everything that was going to happen on all of those. I'm horrible at just kind of making it up as I go.
Well, it's not the type of story that you can really, especially given the fact that it has a defined beginning, middle, and end. It's like a 6-issue run. If you get yourself into a corner and you have to come up with some sort of kind of quick solution that may not have been, I don't know. I think readers would have felt that. And I think you would have felt that.
Oh, dude, I completely agree. Listen, I've written whole screenplays from the approach of like, well, let's just see what happens. And then I get to here, I was like, okay. And I got to the end of it, I was like, it's okay.
Yeah.
I just spent a month writing this thing and it's just garbage.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it might have a couple of interesting ideas, but like after I did that, I was like, that's not how I can't write like that. You have to kind of do that to realize it's bad. But I mean, just the way that I work the best. But, and I would say like, so I write it all out in outline, but then I kind of go back and then as you're traveling down the outline roadmap you made, like you may find some fun new stuff and then I'll lean into that and do it. But I mean, I just kind of need to know where I'm headed next.
When you are scripting it, are you putting panel descriptions in and things like that for yourself? Are you figuring that out in like a layout phase, or how does the writing transition into the art for you?
Yeah, so I will, as I'm scripting, I definitely do like a little more than just rough layouts on spreads. And I'm just I'm kind of pretending that I'm writing it for somebody else to draw. So I'll put in the descriptions just in case I forget what the heck I was thinking. You know what I mean? I just want to make it as detailed as I can. And then also, I mean, I put it out there for anyone to look at, for my editors and stuff. So what was also handy is that I had the scripts, and then we have Riley Rossmo doing all the cool B variant covers on this thing. So he didn't take long before he got to the point where I didn't have any more like art and script or specifically art pages for him to look at and be like, well, what's this issue about? So we were just giving him script and stuff to work from. So it worked out that I had sort of detailed scripts. But yeah, I'll do that. So I kind of already have layouts for everything by the time I'm ready to actually hunker down and do this stuff. So then I'll do like little tighter pencils for the pages, and then I start inking and painting.
Mm-hmm. I think that's one thing that's interesting is like, I think anybody that looks at this is probably just assuming it's watercolor, and it's not. It's actually gouache, which is, you can use it in the same effect, but it is a subtle difference.
Yeah, and I just like it because it's a little more flexible than regular watercolor. And that kind of playing with that opacity at times is great. And just having it being able to be thicker and a little heavier dutier. The heavier dutier. That's what I just said.
I like it.
I was also inspired by Manuele Fiore and his work, which he works mostly in gouache. Who, if anybody doesn't know, he's an excellent cartoonist who's Italian. I think he's still living in France right now, but his work is incredible. And I was also inspired by his, like, I don't think he really uses Photoshop for cleaning up stuff. He just kind of fixes it on the page, which you can do when you're working sort of more thick gouache stuff. I personally do fix stuff in Photoshop because I don't have that time.
Well, I mean, it's tricky, right? Because it's like, one of the advantages of working traditionally like you do is you get your happy accidents. You get the nice little things that like turn out really nicely. But then the downside is you can get unhappy accidents, and then you can clean it up in Photoshop if it's a problem.
Oh, yeah. I kind of realized for just efficiency and speed and to make my pages, relatively close to when I needed them, like I needed that flexibility. So basically, also, the same thing with working in movies, right? So if you're doing special effects, you're, quick tip, like do as much as you can practically. You can always enhance practical stuff that's shot in real life and make it look real. Working from a completely, CG sort of point of view, like it just like it never quite looks the same. And I feel like same thing with when I was working in this. So I would just do as much as I could. I basically just make the page. But if I have a big mess up, I was like, you know what? I kind of wish I would have, moved that thing over a little bit, whatever. Like I'll fix it in Photoshop. But because it's all just the page that I'm working with in Photoshop, I'm literally like Photoshopping the image, and it works just really well.
I mean, it really does. I love the gouache. I think it's like one of the most standout parts. Actually, I do want to give a shout out to my favorite panel from the series. Issue number 2, when Sam is very seriously riding her bike to her store. And instead of using inks for your speed lines, you use gouache. And I think that is such a cool little thing. It also really emphasizes like the fall small towniness of like the thing. I don't know why I look at that and I'm just like, this seems like a pleasant place to be. And I'm like, also murders are happening. I did want to ask about like this is outlining, heavy outlining, scripting, penciling, inking, gouache, and then you hand off to Haas, to Hassan Otsmane-Elhaou. That's a lot. And this is also like your first major project. How much of a learning curve was this project for you? And like, how long would each issue take? Because I think everyone would forgive you if the answer was pretty long.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, I was aiming for around like 6 weeks, and it would be more like 6 to 8. And it was just, I was aiming for like 3 pages a week, and it just depended on what was all going on with that. My wife and I also have a 19-month-old at this point. So like at the time when I started in on the art, she was 3 months old. And so that was also an interesting challenge. So not a lot of sleep, and then working early mornings, late night. It definitely was hard. Yeah, it was not easy. And a lot, basically towards the end, I just didn't have a break. I just basically worked every day for many months.
The comic book way. Also probably the film way once again. So there you go.
Yeah. What's crazy though is that like, it is kind of like that, but it's not quite, you still have downtime. Like there would be like, I would say like there's going to be, you might have one day off a week, or then also you may just like, you wouldn't be shooting quite that long unless it was like a huge movie or series or something. So like that was, it was definitely a marathon.
Yeah.
But it was also, the learning curve was kind of like, I would put it this way. Now with all the lessons learned, I don't think it would be as hard, just because I know what that is now, and I can sort of, schedule properly, I would say. So it's, I mean, fingers crossed the next go around is a little easier on my body.
Do you think you would do things differently the next time?
Yeah. I probably just have to do a scheduling, to be honest. Like, I think I would just like start way earlier just to give myself that time. And I mean, like, this is what I want to have happen next time, David. I I give myself like a lot of time, right? We start doing the pages, and then it turns out I'm just done early. This is what I want to have happen.
I love that idea. Be done early. Boom. Yeah. I think you've just invented a new approach to comics. I like this.
Oh my God. Can you imagine?
I can't. It is nice that you had Haas, though. I mean, there is a part of me that's like, what if you just lettered it yourself? But then at the same time...
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Haas is such a perfect compliment. I love how interactive and thoughtful his lettering choices are. I mean, they always are, but it's just, it is a really essential part to this book in a lot of ways.
I hit the jackpot. I'm not going to lie. Like, so when I worked with Maggie, that was like the first huge stroke of luck, my editor. And then when I worked with Haas, it was the other huge, like he was on the top of the list, obviously, because why wouldn't he be? And I just was like, he's not going to say yes, but like, let's just get the no out of the way. So
I mean, it seems very Haas. It seems very Haas.
Well, again,
you didn't
like
know.
A nobody. Yeah, I didn't know, and I'm very much a nobody. So I was completely like, wait, I would, these are my top choices. Let's see what they say. So Haas said yes, and I was like, oh, okay, awesome, this is incredible. Okay, cool. And even just the first issue, I was just blown away. I mean, for obvious reasons, he's just like incredibly talented, super thoughtful. Coming from an analytical, critical point of view, he's just like, very intelligent. And I've been watching his work on Strip Panel Naked and also Panel by Panel, all that stuff. So for all those reasons, that's why, he was a big choice for me. And then the work that he turned in was incredible. It's just like the little things, like in issue 2, when you have like Cherry falling down and stuff, or like for the grumbling, and does these little balloons with he'll have balloons with like squiggles in them while they're just sort of grumbling and stuff like that. Like just little things like that are so incredible. Just balloon placement, things like that as well. Like it's always fun, thoughtful stuff that he's trying out. And he's very open to, feedback and whatever's, working or whatever you're trying to do or whatever. But I mean, 9 times out of 10, or even like, smaller ratio than that, like he's always knocking it out of the park. Like, it's great.
There's this one line he has, I think it was in issue 5. It might be issue 4. Actually, I think it is issue 4, where Nigel says something to Sam, and he says it in this way that I can only describe as serial killer sexy. And it's only that way because of the way that it's like kind of squiggled into like this weird balloon. And I'm just like, I don't appreciate that, Haas. It was a great decision. It works perfectly, but it makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah. Is it the issue 4 when she startles him?
Yeah, exactly. He's like, I like it when I'm startled. I'm like, oh no. Ugh.
It's so great.
Why is this worse than your killing? I don't like this. Did you do the sound effects, or did Haas do them?
I did a lot of the sound effects.
I like the honk one when Cherry's there and it actually cuts off some of Haas's lettering.
Oh yeah, that was the thing. That was his. Yeah, so I put the honk in, and then he totally just like did the awesome move where it's just like the obnoxious honking cutting off the conversation.
Oh, yeah, because it's like, I'm sure people are used to like Cherry like making it hard for them to hear each other because she's like,
oh yeah,
getting honked at because she's like, I gotta get my latte. I'm like, shut up, Cherry. God damn it.
That's a very good Cherry.
Just a few more questions. I want to ask something about that's been interesting about this book. In a time of very little in the direct market of comics hitting in a very real way, I've heard from a number of retailers that Beneath the Trees has done incredibly well, including from like the biggest account in all of comics retail. While I have no doubt that some of that, I mean, you talked about the variants. There's variants. There's also, I mean, one of the funny things about comics is like having multiple prints leads to more covers, which is in itself like a very appealing thing. And you've had a number of prints because it's sold really well. It has managed to become a very notable hit in a time bereft of those. I'm sure you weren't going in thinking that this book was going to necessarily pop and like become a big hit, but beyond, well, I mean, I'm sure you were hoping it would, but I don't think you were like, come on, big monies. But beyond its quality, like, why do you think that is? Like, do you have any sense as to what people have connected with this book, especially after talking to them at cons and everything?
I mean, I don't.
Why you
first off,
sell
like,
so good, Patrick?
yeah.
Damn.
I have no idea. Like, I'm very much feeling that this is lightning in a bottle. If I never enjoy this type of success again, I would totally understand. Like, it feels like such a strange thing to try and court success like that, that you're gonna set yourself up for disappointment. But at the same time, like, I am enjoying this weird success with this book. I mean, like, if I were to just mention the stuff that people talk to me about, the things they're really into are kind of like what you pointed about, like with the bath scene from issue 1, right? There's like, the weird digressions that I take with the book seem to be the things that people are very much responding to, which is awesome from my point of view, because I thought that was going to be the weird stuff that turned them off.
Yeah.
And so it's basically just kind of, an encouragement to continue making the weird stuff, a priority in the books. But and I say they're weird. Maybe it's not weird. Maybe it's like totally just the human element that's kind of being breathed into the books, right? But like with issue 3, like issue 3 is all about grief and the weird interior lives that we lead. And like Samantha has her weird interior life, and Melody has her weird interior life where she sleeps with the life doll that's based off of her dead husband. And it's like, that strangeness, but then also the very universal element that we all kind of have these interior lives, and we also all deal with grief in different ways.
Yeah.
The issue like that was, just hearing from readers, they're way into it. That might have something to do with why people are responding so well. I mean, same thing with issue 5. Like, issue 5 is a weird one. Like, it's a very strange little journey that Samantha's on, where she kind of freaks out and has her dark night of the soul, so to speak. So like, it's just kind of I don't know. If I were to attribute it to anything, maybe it is that. It's hard to think that I can sort of strike gold twice, with something else. But I mean, I'm very happy with how it's been going.
I do think it's interesting because, well, I think there's a lot of different reasons. I think that horror is having a moment in comics, and it has been for a while. And I think that a lot of the horror we get is pretty similar in flavors. This is not a similar flavor, and I think that helps. But then another big thing is a lot of people, I think, have some level of dissatisfaction with individual, like when something's come out in single issues. The funny thing is this was originally going to be a graphic novel, and yet it works perfectly in single issues because you read each issue has its own identity.
Yeah. That was a huge, just to digress on that for a second, that was a really big, as soon as I realized it was going to be single issues, I made a big push to give them all their own little identity, and they kind of have their beginning, middle, ends, even though they're part of this bigger story.
And that's rare. I mean, like, to have a cohesive 6-issue story that also is comprised of satisfying chapters. I mean, for a long time, that was the foundational elements of comic book storytelling, is like having a single issue that works as an individual chapter, but also as part of a larger whole.
Sure.
I think that, like, that's the type of thing when you read that first issue, and a lot of what you do is very good at, like, stimulating word of mouth, because, people are like, you can read this, you don't need to know anything, you just pop in, and it's very satisfying, and you're going to want to know what's happening next, because it ends in this, like, really shocking place. And then next thing you know, word of mouth hit, first issue does well, second issue probably does slightly less well, by the third or fourth issue, you're probably up, and it just kind of snowballs from there. And, like, that's, I don't know, you can't really predict hits, and you can't really, like, reverse engineer them, but I think there's just, like, a lot of things that people respond to because of what you do and also what others don't do in a weird way.
Yeah, it was weird because it also, like, the first issue came out and sold out within that, by the end of that week. And then the second issue got pushed for the reprint to show up.
The second issue was probably up then.
Yes. So every issue has gone up, David.
Yeah.
Like, all the way down the line. And so, which is nuts. But, like, it's just been a weird, man. I mean, who knows how you would replicate? I think a big part of it was nobody knew who I was.
Yeah. I mean, that doesn't hurt. In a weird way, it doesn't hurt.
It weirdly helped.
Yeah.
Because that scarcity drove up the value of it on the seller's market, and then also just made people go, like, I just want to get my hands on it just so I can see what people are talking about. And so it served it all kind of in a very advantageous way. It's just been a real strange, lightning in a bottle. Yeah.
I imagine so. Well, to close, I actually want to talk about all of where you find yourself, because, we talked earlier about, like, the kind of natural conflict of the time to do your varying, the projects you're passionate about, film, comics. Kind of hard to do both at the same time. Beneath the Trees is wrapping. You have Free for All coming soon at Zoop. It's going to be. I do want to say really quick. I love the concept of free for all. I know you already did that. Yeah. I haven't read that, but the sentence, imagine a utopia where billionaires are forced to donate half of their wealth to society or else fight to the death to keep it. Oh, yeah. Maybe that's another one. Your concepts are very simple and like very easy to appreciate from a modern perspective. Like that thing, it's so tapped in to like kind of how a lot of people are feeling, but also it has this awesome concept of like gladiatorial battles. It's like real world plus thing we're feeling equals good. Anyways, so yes, that's coming on Zoop soon. But now that you're kind of in it, are you looking for like a balance between your different interests, or are you kind of feeling comics right now and just trying to figure out where that might take you?
I'm feeling comics right now and waiting to see where it takes me. I've got a bunch more stuff that I want to do, and I'm having a great time making the work and putting it out there and having it be read. Like it's just it's a blast. So, I mean, ultimately I'm a creative person and I just want to create stuff and put it out there, kind of whatever that's in right now. And this has like the amount of traction I'm having with this is incredible. It looks like the path of least resistance to continue working in comics. Like I'm having a blast doing it. And I would like to very much do more. In a weird way, it kind of also feels like I should have been doing this for a long time. And it's because it's very satisfying and I'm finally doing it. Basically, it's kind of how it feels. Like I'm having this weird midlife crisis where I'm just kind of like, I should have been doing this all along, and that's fine. Now I'm doing it and I'm having a great time. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
It seems like you've really, I don't know, like I talk to a lot of creators who do their work and then immediately kind of want to forget about it to some degree, especially people who draw their own work too, where it's just like all you see is the mistakes. That's like a common thing.
Oh, sure.
And like I find it interesting that the very first thing you do after you finish this is revisit a previous project when like most people would be like, hell no, that is like the last thing I want to do. And you're like, how could I do this, but get it to more people in this moment? And so let's crowdfund it and get it out there. And I think that's really interesting. I wonder if you have kind of a different relationship with your work because you're coming at it from a different perspective where you don't have that like, I can't look at Free for All. This is disgusting. What have I done?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I definitely see a lot of stuff that I wish not a wish, but like I would have done differently now. But it's very much a comic of a moment that I made it in. But it's funny because like conceptually, it still like resonates super well. A lot of the things that inspired that were based around the end of 2016, kind of how I felt the world was feeling. And then now I feel like it's just accelerated. Like it's the same feeling that I have. So when Zoop reached out on it, probably because of Beneath the Trees, and they were just kind of like, I noticed you have this comic. You never printed it. Would you want to print it? We could do a campaign. I was like, that sounds perfect. Yes, I would like to do that. And so it just kind of felt, like the time to do it. I also feel like the pages would look great on printed. Yeah, it was kind of a no-brainer. I just thought, why not, And so, and it might, before it seemed probably harder, honestly, to try and crowdfund something like that. I feel like it'd probably be a lot easier, to be honest, given all this other stuff. So yeah, that was kind of the main thing behind it. I feel, and I honestly, yeah, I mean, I appreciate the kind words about the premise. I feel like it's a good premise.
It's a great premise. Yeah.
So like, I feel like, wider audience probably sink their teeth into it.
It's kind of the perfect comic project for you too after Beneath the Trees, because it's like all those ones like taking 6 to 8 weeks and you have to grind through it and everything like that. This one, you already did it 6 years ago.
Dude, yeah. And when I did it, they were all print ready. Like I was very much like, it might get printed. I don't know. I should do this to size just in case.
Good job, previous Patrick.
Yes, thank you, old Patrick.
Well, Patrick, I'm very excited for Free for All. I'm very excited for the end of Beneath the Trees where nobody sees. But that is all I have for you. Thank you for taking the time to talk about Beneath the Trees, Free for All, your career, and everything else. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, man. Thank you so much, David. I totally appreciate being on the show.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with cartoonist Patrick Horvath. You can find his work in Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees at IDW and the upcoming Free for All at Zoop. Big thanks to Deanna Chapman for stepping in to edit this week's episode. If it sounds better than usual, it's because of her. Love Off Panel, want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts today and give the show a rating or review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing it on Patreon. Find the show at patreon.com/offpanel. And when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast as well as weekly content and more. Want even more? Subscribe to my subscription comic site Sketched at sketch.com for long-form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content. You can find Off-Panel and Sketched on social media by following on Twitter and Instagram at @SketchComic or following me at @SliceFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including John Auerbach, Dustin Weaver, Ninja Assassin Love Story Webcomic, Brandon Heyman, John Neesmith, Aiden Hammond, Kenny Myers, JKJ Art, Faith Aaron Hicks, Yeah Comics, Ben Rowe, Cameron Brown, Jonathan Breen, Danny Ollies, Charlie Stickney, Tom Drennan, Jeremy Thomas Burke, Jared Schwab, Scott Dunn, Chip Mosher, Seth Pomeroy, James McEwen, Andrew Lehman, Christina Merkler, Scott Place, Travis Gibb, Darcy Van Polgees, Travis Schmeiser, Tom Evans, Reed Beeman, Kelly Sudaconic, Max Wood, Jeremy Lambert, Brian Holt, Nira Levy, Jason Hussa, Kieran Gillen, Jonathan Kent Uratam, Henry Johnson, Django Boren, James Tynan IV, Chris Langford, Jason Wood, Tom Beachy, Ben Domstead, Ron V, Nick Walker, Patrick Hoyle, Isaac Oren, Capes and Tights Podcast, Klaus Vandeven, Submed Industries, Jack Mulqueen, Carl Kerschel, Robert Masella, Elza Chartier, Luke Nakashoji, Dr. Luke, Scott Hazelwood, Canadian by Proxy, Bradley Rader, Carl Choi, Brandon DePillis, Patrick Bauer, Declan Shalvey, Dan Carino, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Brian Klein Q, Liana Kangas, Nick Bennett, Daniel Whitfield, Susanna Pullo, Reed Hinkley Barnes, Mario Tiambang, Andrew Carita, Stephen Holt, Philip Myrick, Chris Pachal, Torrin Grunbeck, Fuzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Waltz Comics and Books, Akil Wilson, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Reinwan, Vita Ayala, Achilles, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, David Kelly, Nick Polito, Matthew Groom, Jason Massey, Adam Bogart, Matthew Taylor, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendrick, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Colin McMahon, Adam Highfield, Fiona Staples, Mark Abnett, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Wolfpack for letting me use their song Outro as the show's opening theme, and to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off-Panel's outro and ad music just for the show. Check out both their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.